The subject of predestination is generally avoided by most Christians.
I don't know why, but it seems as though those who have any sense of the subject are in fact embarrassed that it's very mentioned and spelled out throughout the Bible. As soon as we actually believe the gospel, we're very ready to receive the straightforward truths of the Bible, what it teaches about Jesus Christ, the reason for our existence and the future. This is like a first love. It is from this point that we should go on and grow in the knowledge of God and not remain as children and receive all that the Bible teaches on every subject. When I became a Christian and was converted at the age of 20 from a life of crime to Christ on the 16th of January 1970, I learned to read and study the Bible along with Christian literature for myself. I soon discovered that the Bible clearly taught that God has predestined all things and all things are determined by a sovereign God. There is nothing that takes God by surprise or by chance. And God has in fact chosen a vast number of people in Christ to be saved. These are styled the elect. Now let's hear Dr. R.C. Sproul as he continues in his studies on predestination.
Do you have a doctrine of predestination? How much have you thought about this? How deeply have you pursued the biblical teaching of election? Is this something you'd rather just ignore and not play around with? Is this something that for you casts a shadow over the kindness and the righteousness of God? Is this a troubling thing, a hard saying? Well, if any of those things are true for you, I hope that you will continue to look at this doctrine and dig into it as deeply as you can. Because if there's nothing else to be gained from a study of this doctrine, it is a doctrine that forces us to look more closely at the character of God and at our own sinfulness. And I frankly don't think we can spend too much time studying the character of God. I don't think that we can have too much of a developed understanding of the grace of God. I don't think that we can ever have an exaggerated view of the greatness of God. Nor can I believe that it's going to be harmful to us to explore the depths of our own human weakness, as I think virtually all of the errors that plague the church and her doctrine relate to one of two errors: either an underestimation of the greatness of God or an overestimation of the greatness of man. Perhaps the most controversial theological doctrine in the Bible, namely the doctrine of predestination. In our first session, I made the observation that virtually every church and every Christian who's ever lived has had to come up with some doctrine of predestination in an effort to take seriously the manifold references in the Bible to the concept of predestination. But today we want to begin by asking the question, what is predestination? Now, it would be nice if I could say to you that even though there's all kinds of disagreement about this doctrine, about its importance, about its truth, and all the rest, at least we all agree what we're talking about when we talk about what the doctrine means or what it is. Sadly, I can't do that because it seems like there's as many different definitions of predestination as there are doctrines of predestination. So we'll have to build somewhat slowly on this. And the way I like to approach matters like this is, first of all, by looking at the words themselves. And, of course, the concept of predestination, the word predestination, I've been saying, is in the Bible. I've been saying the concept is there, but the Bible wasn't written in English, and so the English word predestination isn't in the Bible. We have a Greek word in there, and more than one Greek word that is used there for the concept. Pro-orizo is one of them. And the idea here is, just as the prefix pro in Greek corresponds to the English prefix pre, the idea of something that is pre or pro, as it were in the case of the Greek, means something that takes place in advance, in front of, or before, in time, something that follows later. So when we're talking about predestination, we're talking about something that happens beforehand or before something else in time. Now, if we just look at the English word, we have the word destination. Now, we use that word frequently in our language, don't we? And the destination is the place we are ultimately trying to reach. It is the end of our trip. It is the end of the road. When I get on the train or on the airplane, or if I buy tickets, they want to know, what is your destination? That is, to what place are you headed? Where are you trying to go? Now, if I want to go to Los Angeles, and that's my destination, and if I go on the train, I may have to go through Phoenix. But the idea here is that if I go and buy tickets, and they say, what is your destination? I don't say Phoenix. I say Los Angeles. Even though I am going to Phoenix, Phoenix is an intermediate stop. It's not the ultimate destination. It may be the penultimate destination, but it's really not where I'm headed. I am headed to Los Angeles. And so we're talking here about destinations as a point along a continuum that we are trying to reach. We have another word that is derived in English from this word, which is a little bit more weighty, and it is the word destiny. When we talk about our destiny, we talk about more than a geographical location that happens to be a destination. We're talking about our destiny. It's what happens to us ultimately. My wife and I grew up in the same community, went to the same elementary school, graduated from the same high school. So we share in common a whole lot of people that we knew as children. And often when we're driving somewhere and we're discussing in a nostalgic vein the days of our youth, we will ask ourselves questions concerning or regarding these people that we once knew. Now, every time that we talk about them, we formulate our question in exactly the same way. We use exactly the same terms, and I suspect you use the same terms. We will speak about Judy Zello, and the question will be what? I wonder, finish it for me, what ever happened to Judy Zello? I mean, see, this isn't just some private way of speaking that my wife and I engage in. We all talk. I wonder what happened to Eddie Hartman. I wonder what happened to Jeannie Cunningham. I wonder what... Do you understand what we're saying there? We don't say, I wonder where they are. I wonder what they're doing. We may be wondering those things. But it's interesting that we use the phrase happen to. Because when I say, I wonder what happened to Judy Zello, I'm presupposing that in some sense, Judy Zello is a victim or a passive receptacle of something that has happened to her. And I'm really speculating with an assumption about some kind of view of kismet or of fate. I'm not a fatalist. I don't read fortunes. I don't follow the astrological guides in the horoscope or anything. But I do believe that I have a destiny. And that you have a destiny. And that Judy Zello has a destiny. And in God's providence, that destiny is in His hand and in His eternal plan. That before I was ever born, there was a destiny that was written by God before the foundation of the earth. Now, that doesn't mean, in and of itself so far, that every detail of my life was programmed or preordained or foreordained or predestined by God. I mean, the doctrine isn't saying all that this much. This doctrine is dealing with our ultimate destiny. As I say, those other questions belong more properly into the doctrine of providence. And I should be quick to say, before you pick up your pen and write me a letter and think I've become Arminian in the last 5 minutes, that R.C. Sproul does believe that from the foundation of the world, every detail of his life was under the providential supervision and government of God and was ordained by God in eternity. So don't misunderstand me. I'm just simply saying that when we encounter the doctrine of predestination in its initial form here, it doesn't include all of those things in its particular scope, and so that's well beyond the boundaries of what we're looking at now. But I'm saying that predestination does concern your destiny, your final destiny, where you're going. And I think we can all agree on that. But that's about as far as we can get agreeing. Well, maybe we can do a couple more things. Again, the word proorizo means to choose beforehand or to ordain beforehand. And I think we can get at least most Christians to agree that God is not simply a spectator of human events. A recent book was published by a group of scholars called The Open God, where they have foisted upon us a view of God where God's knowledge is limited, his power is limited, his character changes, he's not immutable, he's not omnipotent, and he's not omniscient, but rather he is open. He responds to things in history as they happen. And all of this is designed to escape out from under any idea of a God who in his providence and in his sovereignty governs the scope of human affairs. I personally think that book that speaks of the open God is, in my judgment, a godless book. It is a godless book because it strips God of his attributes and of his character and exalts man in the place of God. And I think those who involved in writing it and those who endorsed it should be ashamed of themselves. But in any case,